on the edge of California's most beautiful coastline, where the Pacific Ocean crashed against towering cliffs and the city lights reflected across the dark waves, Julian Moretti lived a life that most people only heard about in whispers. To the world, Julian was a name connected with power, fear, and control. He was the man who controlled the underground empire hidden beneath the glamorous surface of the city. His decisions could change the fate of powerful men, and his enemies knew that crossing him came with a price. For years, Julian had survived wars that destroyed others. He had escaped betrayals, assassination attempts, and dangerous rivalries that would have broken ordinary men. His intelligence made him untouchable, and his reputation made people think twice before standing against him. But behind the walls of his luxurious cliffside mansion, away from the criminal world, Julian carried a loneliness that nobody could see. Power had given him everything except peace. That changed when Celeste Marlowe entered his life. Unlike everyone else around him, Celeste never looked at Julian with fear. She saw the man behind the reputation. She saw the person hidden beneath the cold expression and endless responsibilities. With her, Julian could forget the violence surrounding his world and experience something he had almost forgotten existed: trust. Over time, Celeste became the only person Julian allowed close enough to see his true self. In a world where loyalty was rare and betrayal was common, she became his greatest comfort and his biggest weakness. Julian Moretti had defeated countless enemies because he understood their plans before they acted. He could predict their moves, recognize their lies, and protect himself from almost any threat. But love created a blind spot that even the most powerful man could not see. The woman standing beside him was the one person he never thought he needed to question. Celeste appeared perfect. She was elegant, intelligent, and devoted. She knew how to calm Julian when the weight of his empire became overwhelming. She was the person who convinced him that maybe he could have a future beyond violence. Yet small details from her past remained unanswered. There were moments when Celeste became distant for reasons she refused to explain. There were conversations she avoided and memories she kept hidden. Julian noticed these things, but his feelings always convinced him to ignore the doubts. Because when a man like Julian Moretti finally trusted someone, he trusted completely. What Julian did not know was that his enemies had spent years searching for a way to defeat him. They had studied his empire, followed his movements, and tried to discover the one thing that could bring him down. They never found his weakness in his business. They never found it in his power. They found it in his heart. And while Julian prepared to leave his violent past behind and build a peaceful future with Celeste, someone in the shadows was already preparing the final move that would destroy everything he believed about love, loyalty, and trust. The woman Julian planned to protect forever was about to become the secret that would bring his entire world crashing down. Deep inside the hidden forests of Oregon, far away from the noise of the city, a new war was quietly beginning. Surrounded by endless trees, abandoned mountain cabins, and forgotten roads covered by mist, Victor Ravello's men prepared a plan that had taken months to create. They knew fighting Julian Moretti directly would be almost impossible. Julian was not a man who could be defeated by weapons alone. He had survived every attack because he always stayed 3 steps ahead of his enemies. His empire was protected by loyal soldiers, powerful connections, and a reputation that made even his rivals hesitate. So Victor decided to attack the one place Julian never expected: his heart. The operation began without warning. Celeste Marlowe disappeared on a night when Julian believed everything around him was finally under control. Within hours, his security team discovered that she had been taken by Victor Ravello's organization. For the first time in years, Julian faced a situation where his power meant nothing. His influence could control businesses, politicians, and criminals, but it could not instantly bring back the woman he loved. Then came the second revelation. Victor had not only taken Celeste. He had captured Isla Whitmore, the daughter of City President Nathan Whitmore. The news sent shockwaves across the entire country. The kidnapping was no longer a simple criminal attack. It had become a battle involving politics, power, and the criminal underworld. Victor's demand was clear. He wanted Isla Whitmore in exchange for Celeste's freedom. The message was designed to break Julian mentally. If he saved Celeste, he would be blamed for allowing the president's daughter to die. If he protected Isla, he would lose the woman who had become his entire world. For the first time, the most feared man in the city was trapped between two lives. The world watched Julian's next move carefully. Government officials demanded answers. Rival criminals waited for weakness. The media followed every rumor about what the Mafia king would do. Everyone believed Julian had finally been defeated. But they did not understand one thing about him. Julian Moretti was dangerous not because he had power. He was dangerous because when someone threatened what he loved, he became impossible to stop. Behind closed doors, Julian studied every detail of the kidnapping. The location, the timing, the demands, and the behavior of Victor's men. Something about the entire situation felt wrong. It was too organized, too personal, too carefully designed. Julian realized this was never only about an exchange. It was a trap created specifically for him. Someone wanted him to make a choice that would destroy him, no matter what decision he made. As the rain poured over the Oregon forests, Julian received a secret message from an unknown source. The information inside forced him to question everything he believed about the kidnapping. Because the message revealed that Celeste Marlowe's disappearance was not the only secret hidden in Victor Ravello's plan. High above the frozen valleys of Colorado, where endless snow covered the mountains and abandoned military tunnels disappeared beneath the ice, Julian Moretti prepared for the most dangerous mission of his life. The world believed Julian was walking into a trap with no way out. They believed Victor Ravello had finally found a method to control the Mafia king. By taking Celeste and Isla, Victor had created a situation where every choice would come with consequences. But they underestimated Julian. The man who built an empire through patience and strategy was not going to surrender his advantage so easily. Before entering enemy territory, Julian studied every detail of Victor's operation. The location of the mountain tunnels, the number of guards, the possible escape routes, and even the psychological weaknesses of the people holding the hostages. To everyone watching from outside, it appeared that Julian had only one goal: save Celeste. But behind the scenes, Julian and his most trusted ally, Adrian Cole, created a completely different plan. They were not going there to make a trade. They were going there to end the war. Julian knew Victor expected him to choose between the woman he loved and the president's daughter. That was exactly the weakness Victor wanted to exploit. But Julian refused to let an innocent person become a sacrifice. His plan was simple but dangerous. He would make Victor believe he was emotionally defeated while secretly preparing a rescue operation that would save both women. The most powerful weapon in a war was not always a gun or an army. Sometimes it was making your enemy believe they had already won. Before the mission began, Julian spoke with Celeste through a controlled communication channel. His voice remained calm, but behind that calmness was a battle he was fighting alone. He wanted to believe she was still the same woman who had stood beside him through his darkest moments. He wanted to believe their relationship was real. But a part of him knew that Victor's message had revealed something deeper, something dangerous. Julian was not only fighting to save Celeste. He was fighting to discover whether the person he loved had ever truly loved him back. Meanwhile, Celeste believed she still had control over Julian's emotions. She believed his feelings would make him predictable. She thought the bond between them was the reason he would make mistakes. She did not realize that Julian had learned how to hide his emotions better than anyone. As the snowstorm covered the mountains, Adrian Cole and Julian's team moved into position around the abandoned military tunnels. Every soldier waited for the final signal. The rescue operation began. Julian walked alone through the frozen battlefield toward the enemy base, knowing every step could lead to death. He was entering the heart of Victor Ravello's kingdom. But as Julian reached the entrance of the hidden tunnels, something immediately felt wrong. The guards were positioned differently than expected. The security was stronger than the information they had received. Someone had leaked details about his plan. And when Julian stepped into the darkness of the enemy's base, he discovered a shocking truth. Victor Ravello was not waiting for him blindly. He was waiting because he already knew exactly how Julian planned to attack. Beyond the endless desert of Arizona, where golden sand dunes stretched beneath the burning sky and abandoned structures disappeared into the silence, Victor Ravello's hidden fortress stood like a symbol of power and cruelty. Deep beneath the desert surface, inside a massive underground hideout, 2 lives were being held hostage: Celeste Marlowe, Isla Whitmore. And outside those walls stood the one man everyone believed could never be controlled: Julian Moretti. He entered the enemy fortress alone. No army followed him. No visible protection surrounded him. To Victor's men, it looked like the Mafia king had finally accepted defeat. They believed his emotions had weakened him and forced him into the perfect trap. They were wrong. Julian had survived because he never allowed his enemies to understand his true intentions. As he walked through the underground corridors surrounded by armed guards, his expression remained calm. Every step was calculated. Every movement had a purpose. Victor Ravello watched from a distance, convinced he had finally broken the man who had defeated everyone before him. He believed Julian had come to beg for mercy. Instead, Julian came prepared for war. Inside the main chamber, Victor presented his conditions once again. He wanted control, power, and proof that Julian Moretti could be brought to his knees. Julian listened silently. He allowed Victor to believe he was negotiating. But while their attention remained focused on the conversation, Julian's hidden team moved through secret routes around the fortress. Adrian Cole had already positioned loyal soldiers near the escape points. The trap had become a trap against the person who created it. When Julian finally saw Celeste and Isla alive, relief appeared on his face for only a moment. He knew the mission was not finished. The enemy was still surrounding them. Then everything changed. A single gunshot broke the silence. The negotiations ended instantly. Victor's men attacked from every direction, turning the underground fortress into a battlefield. Explosions shook the walls, alarms filled the tunnels, and chaos spread through the hidden base. Julian moved without hesitation. He fought through the enemy forces, protecting both women while his team pushed forward. His goal was not revenge. His goal was survival. The man who had lost his trust in almost everyone was still willing to risk his life for the woman who might have been the reason everything fell apart. Because love had always been Julian's greatest weakness. But it was also the reason he refused to give up. With Adrian Cole and his men covering the escape route, Julian finally reached the exit with Celeste and Isla. The 3 of them escaped the underground fortress as the enemy base collapsed behind them. For a moment, it appeared that Julian had achieved the impossible. Both women were alive. The mission was complete. The enemy had failed. But as they moved across the desert under the darkening sky, a powerful sound interrupted the silence. Helicopters. Multiple helicopters approached from above. Julian looked toward the sky, realizing something was wrong. Those were not his rescue helicopters. Someone else was coming. And whoever was approaching had been waiting for this exact moment. Because the battle Julian thought he had won was only the beginning of the betrayal waiting for him. The dark skies above the tropical island were suddenly filled with the sound of approaching helicopters. Below, the ocean waves crashed against the shore, while the dense forests and mountains surrounding the hidden criminal base remained silent after the chaos that had just unfolded. Julian Moretti looked toward the sky as the helicopters moved closer. This time they belonged to him. Adrian Cole and Julian's loyal soldiers had finally arrived. The doors of the helicopters opened, and trained men moved quickly across the battlefield, securing the area and eliminating any remaining threat from Victor Ravello's forces. The enemy who had believed they had trapped the Mafia king was now forced to retreat. For the first time in hours, Julian allowed himself to breathe. The mission was over. Celeste Marlowe was alive. Isla Whitmore was safe. The nightmare that had started in the Oregon forests seemed to have finally ended. But while everyone around him celebrated their survival, Julian remained unusually quiet. He had spent years learning one important lesson. The most dangerous threats were not always the ones standing in front of him. Sometimes they were the ones standing beside him. Celeste approached him slowly. Her eyes were filled with emotion, and she appeared relieved to see him alive. She held on to him as if she had just escaped the worst moment of her life. For a brief moment, Julian saw the woman he thought he knew. The woman who had comforted him. The woman who had made him believe he could leave his violent world behind. But something felt different. Small details began disturbing him. The way Celeste reacted to certain names. The way she avoided answering simple questions about the kidnappers. The way she seemed less surprised by events she should have known nothing about. Julian noticed everything. He always had. During the journey away from the island, Julian secretly reviewed every piece of information collected from Victor Ravello's operation. The locations, the timing, the security weaknesses, and the way the kidnappers predicted his movements. Slowly, an impossible thought began forming. Someone had not only understood his strategy, someone had helped create the trap. And the closer Julian looked, the more connections appeared between Victor's plans and Celeste's hidden past. The truth was becoming harder to ignore. The kidnapping might not have been planned from outside his empire. It might have been planned from within his own heart. The greatest betrayal was never waiting outside the enemy's walls. It was standing beside him, gaining his trust, and knowing exactly where to strike. Julian looked at Celeste differently for the first time in years. Not with love. Not with anger. With suspicion. As the helicopters moved away from the island and the ocean disappeared beneath them, Julian quietly turned toward the woman he once trusted more than anyone. And in that moment, he saw something in her hand that made him realize the entire rescue had been built on a lie. The peaceful mountains of Montana hid a truth more dangerous than any battlefield Julian Moretti had ever entered. Surrounded by snow-covered peaks, flowing rivers, and endless forests, the luxury mountain resort was supposed to be a place where the survivors could finally find safety. Instead, it became the place where Julian's world collapsed. For years, Julian had faced enemies who wanted his power, his empire, and his life. He knew how to fight people who hated him. He knew how to recognize threats hiding in the shadows. But he never prepared himself for the one person who knew exactly how to break him. Celeste Marlowe. The woman he trusted more than anyone. The woman he believed would stand beside him until the end. As the others moved away to secure the area, Julian noticed the change in the atmosphere. Something felt wrong. The silence was too heavy, and Celeste's expression was no longer the same. Then everything changed. Celeste slowly revealed the weapon hidden beneath her clothing and pointed it directly at Julian. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The man who had faced armies without fear stood completely still, not because he was afraid of the weapon, but because he could not accept who was holding it. His eyes searched her face, looking for the woman he knew. But the person standing before him felt like a stranger. Celeste finally revealed the truth. Her connection to Victor Ravello was not a coincidence. She had not entered Julian's life by accident. Years earlier, she had been sent with a purpose. Her mission was simple: gain Julian's trust, learn his weaknesses, discover the secrets behind his empire, and eventually destroy him from the inside. Every memory Julian treasured suddenly felt different. Every moment of affection, every promise, every time he believed he had found someone who truly understood him. They were now surrounded by questions. The greatest pain was not discovering that Celeste had lied. It was realizing that she knew exactly how much her betrayal would hurt. The Mafia king had spent his entire life searching for enemies, but he never imagined that the greatest enemy would know his heart better than anyone. Julian's anger battled against years of memories. He remembered the moments when Celeste had been there during his darkest times. He remembered believing that she was the only person who saw him beyond his reputation. Now those same memories became the source of his pain. Yet something about her actions did not completely make sense. Julian noticed hesitation in her eyes. A hidden emotion she tried to control. A secret she was still protecting. Because behind the betrayal was another truth. A truth even more dangerous than the weapon pointed at him. Before Julian could make his final decision, Celeste revealed the real purpose behind her mission, exposing a secret that changed the entire meaning of their love story and everything that had happened from the beginning. Deep inside the ancient rainforest of Washington state, where massive trees covered the sky and powerful waterfalls drowned the sounds of the outside world, Julian Moretti faced the hardest battle of his life. This time, his enemy was not an armed army. It was the woman standing in front of him, Celeste Marlowe, the person who had shared his dreams, his fears, and the quiet moments nobody else ever saw. The rainforest became the place where Julian had to decide between the love he once believed in and the justice he owed to the innocent people caught in their war. For the first time in his life, the Mafia king was not fighting enemies with weapons. He was fighting the memories of the woman who broke him. Every moment they had shared returned to his mind. The nights when Celeste made him believe he could escape his violent world. The times when he trusted her with secrets he had never shared with anyone. But now Julian understood the truth. Those memories could not erase the danger she had created. Behind Celeste's betrayal was a larger plan. Victor Ravello's final objective was not only to destroy Julian's empire. He wanted to create chaos between powerful families and use the kidnapping as the beginning of a much larger takeover. Isla Whitmore was still the key piece in his plan. If Julian allowed emotions to control his decision, innocent lives would suffer. For a man who had spent his entire life surrounded by violence, protecting the innocent became the one thing that separated him from the enemies he fought. Julian looked at Celeste one final time. He saw the woman he loved. But he also saw the danger she represented. Celeste tried to explain the reasons behind her actions, revealing that she had been trapped between loyalty to her family and the feelings she developed for Julian. Her mission had started as a plan to destroy him, but somewhere along the way, real emotions became impossible to ignore. Yet Julian knew feelings could not undo consequences. Love could forgive mistakes, but it could not protect people from the damage those mistakes caused. As Victor's remaining forces surrounded the rainforest, Julian made his decision. He chose justice. The final battle began beneath the towering trees and falling waterfalls. Julian and Adrian Cole led their team against the enemies who had planned their destruction. Every move was calculated. Every action carried a cost. Julian fought not for revenge, but to end the cycle of betrayal that had followed him for years. When the battle finally ended, Victor Ravello's plan collapsed. The enemy was defeated. Isla Whitmore was safe. The truth was finally exposed. But victory did not feel like winning. Because as Julian walked away from the battlefield, he carried a loss that no enemy could ever cause. The world would soon see him return as the victorious Mafia king. But they would never understand the price he paid to achieve that victory. Far away from the violence, power struggles, and endless battles that had defined his life, Julian Moretti stood beside a peaceful mountain lake in Alaska. The frozen glaciers reflected across the calm water. The forests moved gently with the cold wind, and for the first time in years, there were no enemies waiting in the shadows. The world believed Julian had won. The city celebrated him as a hero who had saved the president's daughter and stopped one of the most dangerous criminal operations in history. News reports called him a protector. Government officials praised his actions. People who once feared his name now respected it. But nobody knew the truth behind his victory. Nobody knew what Julian had lost to save everyone else. Behind the stories of courage and survival was a man carrying the weight of betrayal, heartbreak, and memories he could never erase. Celeste Marlowe was gone from his life forever. The woman who had once been his greatest source of happiness had also become the person who caused his deepest pain. Julian had spent years believing that power was the answer to every problem. He thought having control over everything would protect him from losing the people he cared about. But the final battle taught him something power never could. A person could control an empire. Person could defeat enemies. But nobody could control the human heart. The world called Julian Moretti a monster because of the empire he built. They saw the fear surrounding his name and the enemies he destroyed. But only Julian knew how much humanity he had sacrificed while surviving in that world. Every decision had taken something from him. Every victory had left another scar. Standing beside the quiet Alaskan lake, Julian began questioning the life he had spent years building. Was being a king worth living without peace? Was controlling an empire worth losing the ability to trust? For the first time, Julian considered walking away from everything. Power, the money, the criminal world that had shaped him. With Adrian Cole's support, Julian slowly began changing the future of his organization. He no longer wanted an empire built on fear. He wanted a life where loyalty meant more than survival and where people did not have to suffer because of his choices. The feared Mafia king was slowly disappearing. And in his place was a man searching for something he had almost forgotten. Years passed, and rumors began spreading across the world. Some said Julian Moretti vanished completely. Some believed he was still secretly controlling events from the shadows. Others believed he finally found the quiet life he had always wanted. But nobody truly knew where the legendary Mafia king went. The only thing left behind was a single message that revealed the truth about his journey. He won every war he ever fought. Except the one against his own heart.